Magic reveals itself to those who remember where to look for it. This is Magic Hour, and I'm your host, Taylor Paige. Welcome back to Magic Hour, everyone. I'm your host, Taylor Paige.
And I'm your producer, Claire. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
I wanted to tell a really funny story about when I was in New York City. A hummingbird spotted Ari, my husband, in the city. And it was so funny. She messaged me on Instagram, and she's a subscriber on Instagram as well. And I share my husband a lot on Instagram. And he's a very distinct looking guy. He's 6'4". He has like a really distinct look. And so I could see, it's funny because he's actually gotten recognized twice and I haven't. And so like when I was in London, he got recognized. They were like, "You're Taylor's husband." And then when he was in New York City, somebody messaged me and was like, "Hey, I'm like literally driving past and I think that I just saw your husband. Are you guys in New York? Like I thought I saw Ari on the street, but he was with two other women and they didn't look like you." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's his mom and his sister. I wasn't there." But it was just really funny and it just makes me so happy. And just to say, if you guys ever see Claire or I out or Ari out, like please say hi.
Yes, please say hi.
Yeah, it makes us so happy and it makes our whole day, and we truly are a community. So we want to see you guys and we want to hear from you, and please continue to send in your listener questions, your magical stories of times that maybe a past loved one made a beautiful synchronicity or a wish came true or the moment you knew magic was real. We really appreciate everything, including your support of the pod, your shares, your 5-star reviews. It just all means so much. But when Ari was recognized, I was just like, that is so funny, and that will probably continue to happen. The other kind of funny story from my travels was, so I could tell the full version of this story on the podcast instead of the abbreviated that I tell to muggles. In my 20s, I just had this desire to learn French. And it was very strange because French was calling to me. And as I learned French, I picked it up pretty easily. Granted, I know English and Spanish, but I picked up French pretty easily and got to a conversational state. And it felt kind of like a remembering to me. And so when I went around 26, I think, I saw my first psychic in Salem, Massachusetts, in a place called Omen, I believe, like on the main street. And by the way, when I went to Salem, that's a whole other story for a different day. But that psychic was like, "Oh yeah, in many lifetimes you've been French and you've been like kind of like a noble French lady, like not the queen, but just like in her court or around. And your family color was this light green." And so it was like really interesting what she said. And I was like, well, that's funny because I randomly felt the desire to learn French. So fast forward, and Duolingo has the word mouche in French, which is like fly. And sometimes Duolingo has such random stuff on the app where you're like, when am I ever going to need to say fly? Like, why are you teaching me that? So granted, I'm 33 now, and I was like pretty proficient at French when I was around 25, 24. So I've lost like almost all my French because my mind has just gone to developing different skills, different hobbies, and I have not one person to practice with. So my French is like kind of embarrassing and bad now. But Ari and I were in Quebec City, where obviously the primary language is French. And Ari was like, "You can get us through, right?" I was like, "I'll try." And so one day we had this driver named Jacques who was like the cutest guy ever. And he took us to Orleans Island, which is like this agricultural island outside of the city where they have a bunch of wineries and different things. And it was so funny because we were in the car and there was a fly buzzing around. And I was like, "Oh, mouche dans la voiture," a fly in the car. And I was like, holy F, I actually needed to know the word mouche. And then it popped up a second time when there was like a restaurant we were going to that was like called like Le Mouche. And I was like, what is going on? Like, does Duolingo actually have a method to the madness? Do they actually go to these countries and see, oh, actually statistically you do need the word mouche? I don't know. I thought that was a really funny story. And I told like the driver, I was like, I was laughing because I never knew why Duolingo taught me this word. And now I know. And he thought it was really funny too.
The creators of Duolingo listening are like, we told you. They're feeling so satisfied now.
Literally, I know. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? You were right and I was wrong. And I'm really glad you taught me the word moosh. So thank you. So this is just a PSA completely aside from magic and mediumship and angels, that if you feel mad at Duolingo for teaching you random shit, maybe it's not random. Maybe there is a reason you need to know that word.
That's like when I was trying to learn Dutch, because my family's Dutch, and they kept teaching me the phrase, let's not be so formal. And I was like, does that come up a lot in Dutch? Like that you have to be like, hey, let's not be so formal. And then in life, it has kind of come up a lot. And I'm like, okay, egg on my face. You do say that sometimes.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, well, you know the culture, Duolingo, I guess. Like I don't know if it's just like Chat GPT making phrases or if it's actually people from those countries, but I'm going to just go with whatever they're saying from now on. So I'm so excited to get into part 4 of my time at Arthur Findlay College. And I know I joke about this every time about how little I remember. And the first time my excuse was that a month went by in between recording. And now I don't really have an excuse because we just edited part 3 like 2 days ago. So I'm going to try my best not to repeat myself. And yeah, let's dive in. So where we left off was basically when I had to do my second demonstration ever, and I was coming down with COVID at the same time. So that was just a pure adrenaline rush. People at the college were dropping like flies from COVID. I know I was joking in part 3 about how after sitting in the power, we would all hug each other in the sanctuary and we were all just like passing COVID around, but it was worth the hugs. And by the way, in part 3, when I told the story about hugging the woman and feeling my mom through her, something I forgot to say, which is really important to the story, is she looked up and said, "It's your mom, huh?" after that. So I was like, oh my gosh, when I was listening back, I was like, I forgot the best part. She looked up and she just said, "It's your mom, isn't it?" And I was like, yes, it is. And I just like kept hugging her and sobbing. And then she was like, "You have a little white dog?" I was like, "Yes, I do. His name is Ronaldo." And she's like, "Your mom comes a lot to you through Ronaldo." And I was like, okay, thank you. Bye. She was so awesome. And that's actually something that is a through line in the mediumship world that I've seen, that I've heard, that I've got messages about as well personally, is that spirit, our past loved ones, work a lot through animals and pets, because I believe pets have a natural ability to perceive the spirit world. I know Ronaldo is always just like shady looking at things, like staring so intensely. And I'm like, okay, who's there, my love? And so like when an animal acts really clingy or just wants to be near you or senses you're upset or in the throes of grief, gets themselves, you know, in your lap, licks your tears, it's like that is your past loved one usually working through them. Not to say that animals aren't angels and know to comfort you on their own, because they definitely do. But especially if it's like a pet of the person who passed, or a pet that isn't usually clingy or doesn't have that usual behavior and they start acting that way, that's how you really, really know. But when it comes to Ronaldo, he's always been clingy to me, but he is just like the biggest grief counselor angel in the entire world. I'll never forget, we actually adopted him 2 weeks before my mom passed. I didn't know she was going to pass yet. So he was Ari's family dog, and then we adopted him. And so he's known Ari his whole life, but he still ran to me like I've always been his mom. I'm the one he follows around. And it's like the cutest thing in the world. And I'll never forget, it was like Thanksgiving the year after my mom passed, which was like her holiday. And we were in my parents' old house, which was a pretty big house, and it had a really long hallway. You've been there, Claire. And there's like a long hallway with a lot of different rooms. It's not like The Shining, I promise. And And so I was like sobbing hysterically in my bedroom, and everyone else was on the other side of the house playing Wii golf. I know. It was like kind of COVID times. It was 2021. Like we were just doing activities in the house, and they were playing Wii golf, and there were only 4 controllers and I couldn't play. And I was just crying in my room because I was like, so not even upset about Wii golf. The grief, and it was my mom's holiday. And Ronaldo, he's 15 now. And at the time, I think he was 13. And you just heard his little nails click-clacking on the wood floors. going in every room. He's like almost blind, like squinting in every room looking for me until he found my room. And it was like one of his first times like in our house. Like he didn't really know his way. And he found me and he came and sat in my lap and licked my tears. And that was like one of the moments where I was like, this is my boy forever. Like, this is my soul dog. I've never felt anything like what I feel for Ronaldo. So fast forwarding in the story, it was the end of week 1. I felt myself coming down with COVID and I just finished my demonstration and people were starting to go home. So I was supposed to stay at the college and that would not have worked out. For my second week, I was in a room that didn't have its own bathroom. And I would also have to walk pretty far to the cafeteria for any food for meal times. And I could feel myself getting sick. So I was like, this isn't going to work. I need to like be able to order room service and just have my own space and quarantine. And so I called Ari in a panic at like 5 a.m. his time. And I was like, I need to like get a hotel. I don't know what to do. And so I ended up staying at this place called Down Hall, which was so beautiful and English. And it's where like, I guess, I don't know, local people from London go for like little escapes to the countryside type of vibes. And it was really pretty. And I just shut myself up in that room. And whenever I had food, I was like, I'm sorry, you guys, like I'm sick. Please just leave it at the door. And I just did my best. And it worked out really well, especially because I'm vegan and gluten-free. And it can be sometimes hard to eat places, but they had options for me. And plus, when you're sick, you're not that hungry anyway. So it just all worked out. But that time period was so intense because the type of fatigue you get when you're sick with COVID is really intense. And I'd basically just slept all day. And in that space, I was integrating everything I had experienced and learned at the college. And I was literally having these vivid dreams. Like one night I had a dream that these twin boys were like in my room with me and they were teaching me how to connect with multiple spirits at once who want to come in together, which was one of my blocks at the college, which I spoke about in part 3, I believe. And so they were like showing me like, yeah, well, one of us will talk to you, but the other one is here and we're a group, but you'll probably connect with one of us more. And they were all like old fashioned. And I guess they died around the property. It was like all of this stuff was just coming through. I was like tossing and turning in my sheets, just integrating all of these lessons. And it was almost like, I know I didn't need to get COVID. That's not what I'm saying, but it was almost like getting sick and sleeping for 3 days was proportional to the spiritual growth that I did that week to just integrate and process everything. And it was kind of a blessing in disguise because I really just sat there and reflected. And it was just a really intense spell of COVID. So I was in this gnarly fever dream situation where I was just integrating the messages. And so after that, I had to go into week 2. So week 2 was even more gnarly than week 1 because week 2 was for people who literally had their own congregations or were like leaders in their community for mediumship. So if I thought I was Delulu for signing up for Aspiring to Excellence without ever practicing in my life, I do not know what the hell I was thinking signing up for this one, but somehow I did. And I think like COVID was almost a protection too. It was like, girl, you go in bed and integrate for a while. And so I got to week 2. And it was interesting because at the end of week 1, my teacher, Suzanne Gibson Foy, said, I'm teaching in week 2 as well. And I just want to let you know that if you feel resistance to your group or kind of frustrated or like you shouldn't be here, it's a normal sensation when you've worked intimately with one group for 1 week and then you're put into another group. It's like a natural form of resistance. So if that comes, it will like wear off by Tuesday or Wednesday. So just give it a chance, which was funny because I actually didn't feel that in week 2. I just felt that in week 1 on day 1. I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't care if I make friends. And then I loved everybody. It was like my natural defense mechanism. So week 2, I get back to the college and I am like a shell. I gave everything to week 1. And then COVID, I got over COVID in 4 days, which is pretty good. So I think I came down with COVID, I think on like a Saturday, and I slept like Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And then Wednesday I went back to the college, and it was like pretty tough because I didn't know what to do. And I was like upset and I didn't want to miss anything. This was like the experience of a lifetime. And I was so excited for it. And so many people had COVID at the college that I wasn't really scared to go back to the college because like so many people had it. And it started off with somebody that worked in the buffet line at the cafeteria. So I think it just like spread that way. But also there was a lady like coughing up a lung every day. And I'm like, okay, you could say it's the lady in the cafeteria, but we all know it was this lady coughing up a lung every single day in the sanctuary. And then all of us hugging each other. Whatever. Peace and love. I am loving awareness. So I go in, and the teacher for week 2 is Val Williams, and the class is called No Limitations. And the person that was supposed to be working with her had COVID. So the other person was supposed to be Minister Lynn Parker, and Minister Val Williams was still the head, the course organizer, like Eileen was in week 1. So Lynn was out with COVID, so I didn't get to meet her, but instead I worked with Deborah Commerce, I think is her name. She was really awesome. And so I get in, and I come in like halfway through the day at lunch, and everybody's in a circle. And this is a class where they're just do demonstrations every day. They're like, okay, like everybody get up and demonstrate. And it's like so interesting. It's not like break off in one-on-one and do these little exercises. It's like, no, we're just practicing being in front of a congregation. And like, this is how you need to demonstrate in front of your congregation. I was like, right, my congregation, of course. So it was really cool though. So week 1, I get in there and they're like, hey, like, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. Also, for some reason, they thought I was like 18, and I'll get to this like a little bit later, but Val said something like, you're so mature for your age. And I was like, Val, how old do you think I am? And she was like, 19, like 18, 20. I was like, I'm 32. And she's like, oh, whoa. It was really funny.
You're looking good, girl. You're looking good.
You know what? Never go in the sun. It's my sun in the 8th house. I just am a creature of darkness. All my stuff in the 8th house, I literally like never go outside. And I was the one at my cousin's beach wedding with an umbrella. Like, that's just me. So I get there and everybody is like demonstrating, and they're all just like awesome and amazing. And they're like, okay, Taylor, like, do you want to go demonstrate? And I, at this point, also kind of lost my voice from COVID. And I was like, is it okay if I just watch? I was like a shell, literally a shell. And they're like, of course, we understand. Like, we know that you're super drained. Like, your cup isn't full. Just observe. So one of the women goes up to demonstrate, and she's like, I'm immediately drawn to you, Taylor. And she's like, and I have a Gordon here. My mom's name was Gordona. And I just immediately, I'm like in this sort of COVID hangover. I was so low energy, but I did not want to miss a minute of anything I could get from the school. And I just had full body chills. She's like, I have a Gordon here, a Gordon for you. I was like, Gordona. She was like, okay. She's like, please don't feed the medium. I was like, oh, sorry. So that just means basically don't say anything that can give them information. Like, let them tell you everything. Just say yes or no. And that's how I like to do my readings too, is that when you go to a medium who's evidential, they don't want you to take what they said and elaborate on it. They just want you to say yes, no, or I'm not sure. Because when you say anything else, it's called feeding the medium information, basically. And it just gets the medium in their mind instead of just in a flow with information from spirit. So she's like, I have a Gordon here. And then she knew because I said Gordon. She's like, okay, it's a girl. And she's like, you know, so much love, feels like a mother, like is sorry she didn't come through as much as you wanted last week. Like just all of this really amazing, beautiful stuff. And that was like my first minute back in the class. And that's the part of Arthur Findlay that's incredible, is that it's not just about your development. You get to be a sitter for all of these developing mediums too. So all day you go through the college getting readings from people. And since I went to such advanced weeks, it was kind of a blessing in disguise because I got like great readings, even though it was a scary week and it stretched me. And so that was really amazing. And you basically just take a journal and write down notes from all the readings that you get every day. And it's like, wow, I didn't even know I needed all of these answers that I got. This is so cool. So that was really, really amazing. And so because this week was so advanced, it was really awesome because I got to see a different side of the college and also spiritualism. And I got to see more of the playful side. Whereas in week 1, it was all about becoming excellent and finding the evidence and doing a good job. You were already assumed to have that in this week 2. And now it was about playing, pioneering, experimenting, like enjoying the connection with spirit. And I really liked that. And the other thing I liked is that week 1 had about 100 mediums who came because the tutors on the course are like pretty well known. I didn't know because I was so new to the whole situation, but I just felt called to go that week. And this second week was maybe like 20 students. So it was much more intimate and everybody got more personalized attention. And it was just, you worked with the group more intimately. And so we got to play, and it's almost like when you learn the rules, then you can forget them a little bit. And I'm not really saying that about the course because spiritualism is a bit strict with what's okay to teach at the college and what's not. And they don't really like when you bend the rules. Like on week 1, when I was like, can everyone say their zodiac signs? They're like, no, we don't do that here. I was like, oh, okay, heard. I was like, well, I'm a Scorpio. So they are pretty strict with those parameters, but they still open it up to let spirit lead you and to play. And so one of the things that we did in week 2 was sit in a cabinet. So this was really interesting. So there's this old cabinet that like some of the greats and the pioneers used to sit in. And basically spirit told them what the quote conducive conditions, unquote, are to produce physical mediumship. So physical mediumship, well, let me rewind. So spirit mediumship which is what I do, is when you connect with spirit, you get a link and you send through evidence and messages from people in the spirit world. Physical mediumship is basically when your own face or things start to morph and change and even start to look like the person in spirit. And how my teacher described it is that it doesn't count as physical mediumship if everyone in the room can't see it. You can't be seeing it just through your third eye and interpreting it. Everyone in the room has to see it. And so basically what the pioneers discovered is that sitting in this cabinet with a red light on you is the right conducive connection for spirit to create physical mediumship. It was really interesting because the way people would sit under the light would cast different shadows. And basically what our job was that once we sat in the cabinet, we had to allow ourselves to step back, almost as if we were going in a trance-like state. We sort of let our consciousness step back and we just let spirit step forward and merge through us. And what was really trippy is that one of the traits of physical mediumship that was happening in the room is the temperature dropped and everyone in the room could feel it. So that technically is a physical mediumship sign too. We all became freezing. And I know that that's sort of like a Hollywood thing. It's like ghost stories. It gets really cold, but it actually is true. When spirit comes through, it does drop temperature. And that's what's really different with spirit than angels, is that angels are really warm and spirit gets a little cooler when they come in. And so that was really interesting to me, how the temperature would drop. And then basically we would just have to all collectively watch this person in the cabinet and see like, oh, for some of us, including myself, I can see aura colors around people sometimes. And I was seeing aura colors when people were sitting in the cabinet. I was also able to see where the spirits were around in the cabinet. Like, and we would all say that as a group, like we see like a cluster of energy in the upper right corner, or we see this. And like everyone would kind of be saying the same thing, which was interesting. And I don't think that it counted as true physical mediumship because we weren't all seeing with our physical eyes the same exact thing, but a lot of us were perceiving with our third eye the same thing and sensing the same thing. So it was like somewhere in between. But I guess, and I've never seen this, so I can't speak to it, but I guess true physical mediumship and physical mediums, which are very, very rare in the world. And again, I'm a see it to believe it type of person. So I'm not saying that I don't believe in this, but I'm also not saying I fully do. I'm somewhere in the middle and I'm open. But I guess physical mediums, which are very rare, create a substance called ectoplasm, where when they're sitting in the cabinet, substance comes out and almost forms like a mask like around them and can take on different features of the spirit person that's communicating through them. And so a lot of people at the college and in that group attest to seeing that firsthand. And so I don't know what to believe, but I'm open to it. And I encourage you guys to be on your own journey of where the line is for you. And so that was really interesting to me. And since I keep saying this, I was so new to everything, I didn't know what to expect. And that was like the best way to go into it. So the physical mediumship was really interesting. When I went into the cabinet, I felt freezing. It was really cold. And I know I was coming off of like just being so energetically drained, but I was sitting in there and I just felt like this calm, peaceful, loving feeling. And I just let my consciousness go, like sleep. And I did feel spirit kind of stepping in around me. And quite a few people said, and this was really interesting and I didn't know what to make of it, that my features changed and that they saw sort of like an elf-like creature. Like, and multiple people said that like my ears like got long and pointy. And I was like, okay, that's really funny because I always wanted to be a wood elf ever since I watched Lord of the Rings, and I know they don't eat meat either. But yeah, I found that to be like really interesting because I was like, I guess there are no limits of what this could be or what this could look like once you're in the spirit world. You're not bound by physical form, and maybe they're just being playful. Like, I genuinely don't know, but that opens up the question, like, are there other types of beings, and where do these ideas come from, and all of these things. So I found that to be really interesting. But you know, every single person in our group was a woman, which is also interesting. And we're going to have a guest on to talk about why that is. But a lot of the women going into the cabinet were being turned into men, and we could see like stubble or like their face getting wider, like the way the shadows would play on them and the way spirit could manipulate the shadows like did change their physical features. And it was really, really fascinating.
My mind is absolutely blown right now. I didn't know this was a thing or possible. And, you know, it does seem kind of like a Hollywood concept, like you talked about, like, you know, that the spirit kind of enters the person and their voice changes. But I had no idea that this was possible. And what a profound experience to watch that happen and watch someone's physical appearance shift.
It was definitely eye-opening, and I didn't know it existed either. And at this point, I was just cracked so wide open. I was like, yes, of course, of course. Like, how could it not be real? What else is next? Are we going to get on our broomsticks and fly around? Like, what else is real? And genuinely, maybe so. I don't know what the pioneers were up to. I don't know what spirit's capable of. And that leads to another experimental practice that they do, which is interesting because when you talk to people in the UK who are part of the Spiritualist Church, they're like, yeah, we do that at my church. And I'm just like, oh, it's like so casual. They don't do the cabinet, well, at least not to my knowledge, but they do something called table tipping. And so table tipping is basically, and I loved our teacher, Val Williams. She was so fun. And so like, she had this twinkle in her eye of just love for this work. And she was such a great teacher for me. But basically, we went into this room. I think we were in I don't remember, but it's a room with a really big, like 1,000-pound table in it. And we all sat in a circle of chairs outside of, like, right next to the table, but not around it. And then there was like more of a stool, like a tiny wooden stool in the middle. And she's like, okay, you guys, like, get the vibes high. So we all had to like listen to music and laugh and dance and sing and like keep singing these songs together and like be in this sort of merry state. And then Val started with like one of her helpers, and they started just letting the table tip. Like one was on either side of the stool, and they were sort of letting it tip and letting it lead them around the room. So it was like this really interesting thing where it was like kind of them, kind of the stool, and it was leading around, but basically saying like, Spirit, where do you want to go? Where does a message need to go? So the table starts tipping. And who, by the way, wherever it goes, that person who gets a message is the next to stand up and tip the table. So they start, Val and this other lady, I can't remember her name. She wasn't one of the teachers officially, but she was a student who works with Val a lot, and she helped out. And so they were tipping, and the table goes all around, all around. We're all singing, we're keeping the vibes high, and it comes right to me out of the whole circle. It stops right in front of me. And she just goes, oh, my love, like, this week was so hard on you, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah. She's like, you gave everything to week one, didn't you? I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, your mom is here and she loves you very much. And she's like, she wanted to make sure you got the table first and that you knew that. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I had to get up and tip the table. And what was really weird about it is there was like this infectious laughter. Like there was something about the vibes being high, and we were all completely sober, that just made us feel kind of drunk and merry. And like, it was almost like we were playing with spirit in this new way. And it wasn't really my strong suit for the level of my development to be like, I have a grandpa here and he's saying this in that environment. I was kind of just flowing with the energy, and I was trying to give my power to the other people because I was like, you guys are more advanced and kind of can flow with spirit. This is literally my second week ever, and I have COVID of like doing this. Like, I'm going to let you guys kind of take over. I was so surprised that the table came to me first. And so then as we were tipping the table and going around and people were kind of coming in, coming out and taking over the table, Val went over to the big 1,000-pound oak table and was like, sometimes I can get this to walk around the room. I was like, what? So she starts calling up people from the circle and is like, I feel your energy. I feel your energy. Come here. And we would basically put our fingertips on the side of the table and barely touch it. And it would like start to completely sway. And she called me up and was like, I feel your energy. Like, Taylor, get up here. And it started like really swaying when I got up there. And I was like, what is happening? And like, granted, we were swaying with it, but even if we were throwing our full weight at this table, it would barely move. And we got this table rocking. Like one side was going up, one side was going out. And we were not like these big, strong women. And we were like, somehow getting it to rock. And she's like, okay, I don't think it's going to go all around the room today. But the day after that, I went back to that room and I tried to shake the table. And I was like, what is going on with this table? I could not budge it. I was pushing my whole weight and it wouldn't even rock side to side. And somehow with all of us just with our fingertips on the side, it was rocking side to side to side to side as people were like playing music and like dancing and singing. It was like such a chaotic environment. And it was almost this like frenzied energy where we were all just sort of caught up in the moment. And I was like, that was one of the moments where I was like, I haven't touched the tip of the iceberg about what this path is about.
I'm trying to imagine exactly what that was like. Like, so the first table was not a big oak table.
The first table that Val and the student did was like a little wooden stool. So people were letting the stool lead them while at the same time Val was calling up people to go to the big table, and everything was happening at once.
Got it. And so when you were tipping the stool, you were like touching the stool and kind of like moving it a bit.
Yes, we were like letting spirit move it through us. It was crazy though, because as somebody who was doing it, there were moments where it was like we were in our head and we were moving the stool and we were like, where can it go? But then there were other moments and other partners I did it with where it really felt like, whoa, wasn't expecting to go that way. Like just kind of in the flow of it.
Wow. And then you went to the big heavy table. I mean, that's just, it reminds me of that thing from The Craft, light as a feather, stiff as a board. Do you remember that, where they like lift her up? And I'm sure all teenage girls have tried that. Also, I love that they thought of that. Like, who was the first one that was like, I know, let's try and like tip this table?
I know. That's what I was thinking the whole time. And that's why I'm like, I want to be a pioneer. Like, what can I create? How can I play with spirit? Like, as consciousness evolves on Earth, I believe there needs to be a new generation of pioneers to meet the spiritual needs of this generation. And so maybe that generation was sort of playing with spirit, proving its existence. But mediumship has evolved, and what was this lady's name? I can't remember her name, but she was really cool. And in week 2, I kind of gravitated towards her, and she was saying, like, we have evolved. Like, mediums used to do things like cabinet work or seances, and she's like, we've evolved to a place where I can stand here with my eyes open and tell you who's here and give you accurate evidence. She's like, I believe that we are more advanced than our predecessors. And I was like, that's a really interesting perspective, because the pioneers are glorified, and for good reason, because they discovered so much. But it's really true. Us modern day spirit mediums who are encouraged to keep our eyes open and to be really professional and to work in these parameters can really work miracles, some would say, with our eyes open without anything but ourselves. And I do think that is an evolution of the craft.
Yeah. And I mean, it makes sense that it would evolve, you know, as we gain new information, then where we are drawing from is a fuller cup of information and ideas. And then that continues to grow and grow and grow. So it makes sense that, like, of course we would be at a more advanced space, and so exciting to think about, like, what lies beyond, like what else there is to tap into and try and explore.
I so agree. It's like, what's next? Spirit speaking through Chat GPT. Like, who knows? But I do know spirit actually manipulates technology easier than other things. Like electricity is like one of the main things that they can manipulate and work with. So I find that really interesting. And I do know magic happens through technology all the time, and that our angels and guides send us synchronicities through when, like, you just open your feed and exactly what you were thinking about is right there. Like, they work through that too. And it's really interesting to think about what the next generation of pioneers will do. And I hope that I'm included in that in some way, because I know I'm newer on the path, but my Aries rising is like, how can I explore and figure things out and play? And I was just so struck by that spirit at the college. So those were 2 of like the really experimental things that we did. And that was really cool. And people were just so talented in this group and just so casual about it. Like, yep, this is just what we do. So one of the things that Deborah taught us, which was a really great takeaway from the week, was this fizzies exercise, where basically when you're nervous and you're about to do a demonstration or something that, you know, scares you, to literally just shake all of your body and just go like just get all of the energy out. And like before giving a reading or something, just doing that, just like shaking up the energy, getting it all out, getting all the jitters out. And so we all did that. And that's why like our classes group on like the Facebook is called like AFC Fizzies, because that exercise was like a really great takeaway for us. And I remember the first reading I did for that group, it wasn't a demonstration, but it was a one-on-one reading. And after doing the fizzy exercise, and it was like really helpful. I was a little scared. I was like, can I still do this? I'm with all of these advanced people. I'm just recovering. My energy levels are low. Like my mind was just ripe for all of the reasons I couldn't do it. And I remember sitting down with this woman, and a woman came through, and it was so interesting because this is the first time I felt a symptom in my physical body to the level that I did there. And it was like a real breakthrough moment for me. And her arthritis was so bad that she couldn't lift her arms. And as I was connecting with her, my arms felt so heavy that I could not lift them. And I just like literally felt that in my arms as if I had that arthritis. And I said to my sitter, my partner, I was like, I have a woman here. She feels very feeble to me, and my arms are so heavy and my fingers feel so gnarled. I cannot even lift them to make a gesture or to grab something. She was like, I know exactly who that is, just from that, which was really amazing. And so I was like, okay, I can still do mediumship, like, yay. And that was my first reading back. And so one of the other exercises that we did, which also blew my mind. So our teacher, Val, I'm not sure, I'm so bad at knowing people's ages and sexual preferences. Like, I think everybody's gay, and I also don't know how old anybody is. So I genuinely just don't know. And so I can't tell you how old Val is, but she's lived a lot of life. And so she came around and she passed. So we all broke into groups of like 3 or 4. And she gave us all a photograph of a woman, a different photograph of a woman. And so we all had to feel into the woman in our picture. And this was called psychometry. So that's when you basically get psychic information from an object, a physical object. So we were supposed to get psychic information from this photo of, we all got a different photo of a woman. And so we all tuned into this photo of the woman in our own groups, and we wrote down what we saw. We saw that she worked in the spiritual world. We saw that she had a difficult relationship with her husband. We saw that she was sick. We saw that she liked gardening. We saw that she had a white flower on her windowsill. We saw all these different things and made a list, which also, it's not really my jam to work in a group. That's what I realized about myself in that situation. I was like, I like to be a solo act, and I know that about myself. Like, I would have rather just sat with that image and done it, but you know what? It's good, and it pushes you to work in other ways, but it's almost like you can't control the pacing. Like, people are already saying things, you know, this, that, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But I did get a few things in there. And so later we went around the group, and everybody said, like, okay, this is what we got from these photos. This is what we got from these photos. And what she said is, every single photo is me at a different stage of my life, which was crazy because every photo looks so different. And so she could say, you're correct, you're incorrect, you're correct, you're incorrect, because every photo was her. And so that was a really mind-blowing exercise.
What a cool way to kind of push you guys to have you thinking like, oh, this is all different people. And then realizing it's all her. And this is something you brought up before, like people, spirits will come to you in different forms as they were different people in their lives. Like, for instance, like my grandmother is my grandmother to me, but she was some hot young thing to her husband when they met, or she was some wild, fun chick with her bestie. You know, it's like we aren't just one thing because we are many things to many people and many things throughout our life. So it makes sense that we would come through depending on the sitter, or that a certain photo or a certain item of ours might call to mind a moment in time of ours.
Absolutely. And so that was just such a cool exercise. And she was really happy with how much we got right. And it was just a really interesting thing. And it's so true. We do really all show up. We have so many different versions of self throughout our life. And that was so distinct in her photos, which I'm sure if you saw a photo of me at 12, at 40, at 60, and at 80, you might think they're all different people too. And so it was just so interesting of an exercise. And that was one of my favorite things. And that's something we can do at home. Like, go Google search an article about someone. Don't look at any of the information and just sit with their photo and see what you get. Like, there are ways that you can practice all around. You just have to be creative.
Yeah, that's such a cool idea. And I love the idea that our objects are imbued with a piece of ourselves, because I think that's so true. Not every object maybe, but we have these things that maybe meant something to us for this particular time, or, you know, were with us on this trip, or, you know, sometimes I have a hard time getting rid of clothes or things because I'm like, but these were the shorts I wore in, you know, Hawaii. And it's like, yeah, they capture, I think, the memory of that moment in a way.
Absolutely. And when you borrow your friend's clothes, can't you feel their energy in the clothes? Like, you're like, this is my friend's shirt. This is not my shirt. This is my friend's shirt. And I can feel that on me. And that's why it's funny, because my whole life, and I never knew what was wrong with me, I can't thrift clothes. Like, I've tried to go into thrift stores, and it's so energetically heavy for me that I have to leave, because I touch all of the clothes and it's like, ooh, this person's energies, this is heavy. Ooh. And I just literally have to leave. And it's the same with antique stores. Like, I made this TikTok a long time ago, and it's like when no one's in the antique store, but you hear a crowd around you. And that is literally how it feels to me when I'm there. It's really intense. And that was my experience before I even realized I was angelic, intuitive, or a medium, or any of my gifts. So if that's you, you might be extra perceptive and clairsentient like I am and not realize it, but there's certain things that are just immediately overwhelming to me, and thrift stores and antique stores are one of them.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. You know, what a history that is captured in each of those items, and a store absolutely full of items that have all of these stories and histories and connections. It must be very loud for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it sort of turns into this like rubber band ball of energy. Like it's not even these clear energies that come through as maybe if I took one and just sat with it, but like it's a mass of all of them in the same place. And it's just a jumble of energy. That's the best way I could explain it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the same thing as being in a crowd, right? It's like when you're in a crowd, you're not really connecting to any one individual, but you're connecting to the energy of hundreds of individuals, and that has its own visceral feeling and energy.
Yes, so true. And I feel clothes are very much imbued with our energy, as is jewelry. Jewelry is a big one. And I think that's why a lot of like past loved ones that come through are like, please wear my ring. Like, I think it gives them an easier time to link up with you in the spirit world when we wear their jewelry or things like that.
Yeah, I could definitely imagine that.
And it's interesting, like, how long does it take for a piece of jewelry or clothing to start to feel like ours, you know? Because sometimes if you keep something for long enough, it's like, no, this feels like my ring now. It doesn't feel like their ring. And so I wonder, what is that passing of the baton that makes something energetically ours?
Yeah, I feel like it's a little bit of like a experience connection or emotional connection. You know, it's like maybe we've worn it now and had an experience in it. And so now it is not just theirs, it's ours. Or maybe it's just been here on my bedside table for weeks and weeks and weeks and become a part of my space that I now have a new relationship to it. And I feel like then it starts to be imbued with our energy as well.
So true. And another thing that is imbued with our energy is our bed sheets. That is a big one, because I remember when I like ended my really abusive 4.5 year long relationship, I had to get rid of all my bedding. I could feel him like literally everywhere around it, and I couldn't sleep in it. I was like, I need all new sheets. That was the first thing I did.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I mean, we spend so much time in our beds, and our subconscious gets to be alive in our sleep.
Yes.
In a way that it doesn't when we're waking. So like the energy shedding that must be happening into our beds and our sheets is probably pretty profound.
Absolutely. And so if you're somebody who's not as clairsentient, you're like, I don't feel energies in my clothes or my jewelry or my sheets, take it from us. And if you go through a breakup or something and you don't want their energy around, just get rid of those things. So the last thing that I want to share about week 4 was, again, just an ode to the openness of this week that I really loved, where it was sort of exploring our unique gifts within the structure. For me, I practiced channeled writing. Another medium made a spirit drawing where spirit just literally drew through them. And so we sat in a big circle on our last day. And keep in mind, I didn't have very much time this week because I came in halfway through. So there isn't as much to share as week 1, which week 1 was just all brand new. So I could go on and on and on about that. And week 2 was in its own way too, because it was a different side of the college. But on the last night, we just sat in a big circle and we all could choose what we wanted to offer to the group, whether it was a demonstration, whether it was a poem, whether it was inspired speaking, just whatever it was. And so I did channeled writing, and I actually ended up connecting to a spirit that had a message for Val about her son, and that was really beautiful. And then another woman did a drawing, like I said, and on it she wrote like teacher, strict, cancer, acting, like other things. She passes it around the circle. People are like, I can't take this. I don't know who this is. I'm not sure. It comes to me and I'm like, that is my acting teacher who crossed over from cancer. And she wrote all of that on the paper already. And it literally looked exactly like her. Exactly like her. My jaw dropped. I was like, I know exactly who this is. This is my acting teacher. She had the same short cropped hair from cancer in the drawing. She had the piercing eyes. She had the same, like everything was her. That was my first time receiving a spirit drawing, which I know one of my mentors, he does spirit drawings and he's so clairvoyant that he can literally say like, show me the eyes again, and like spirit will, and he can see it. But like, it was my first time seeing that. And it was so cool. And everything she wrote next to her was accurate.
That is so cool. And something else I never even thought about doing. Like, I've heard about channeled writing, but I'm also a terrible drawer, so I probably wouldn't be a good candidate for this. But yeah, that, like, of course, that drawing, if you have that skill and that ability, could totally be a way to channel these messages, and in a way where, like, you could recognize someone's face in the drawing. I mean, my mind is blown. Wow.
Basically, spirit works hand in hand with imagination and with creativity. And so I think if you're listening and you're a creative of any type, invite spirit to work with you through it. Like, I just had a clip in my mind, since you're a dancer, Claire, like, invite a spirit to show you their dance style. And maybe you will morph into something completely different than what you're taught in, and you'll start dancing a new way that this spirit is showing you. That just popped into my head if you want to try that.
I do.
Yeah. And just, if you're a poet, invite a spirit to write a poem. But here's the thing, that's one level, is just letting them create with you and seeing, like, when you channel write, your handwriting changes. When you draw, it's like, obviously you didn't know who that person was, but when you dance, maybe it's not the dance style that you would have been in. When it's inspired speaking, maybe your voice gets a little louder and stronger. It's interesting how they all come through. And the other beautiful part about it is to take the practice a little further and ask for evidence. So ask for something recognizable that you could research that you couldn't have known. Ask for things in your medium, no pun intended, that can be recognized, and you might surprise yourself with what comes through. With anything that we're talking about here, just get playful, get curious, try it out, and you might prove to yourself, oh, I can get evidence actually, not just feel like I'm doing it, not just wonder if it's my mind or me, but get evidence. Like, if you set up a videotape and ask spirit to, like, show you a dance style or a choreography that you don't know, and videotape yourself and dance, then you could look up that style and compare it to the tape and see what synchronicities there are. Like, taking it to the next level of verification, I think, is what the college really showed me, is that it exists and we can verify it.
And that makes the message or the experience so much more powerful. I mean, to have a drawing of your teacher and all of that evidence, and then to hear a message.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that has a power that just, oh, I'm connecting to someone and they're saying this. While that could still be a beautiful experience, I mean, it's what I've had with you in angel readings, where you will give me some sort of information that I'm just like, you couldn't, I mean, that's the thoughts of my mind. How could you have known that was what I was thinking or feeling? And then the message coming through just feels so much more impactful. It feels like something I can trust then, because it's not just like another person saying, like, well, you should do this. It's like, no, like, this is tapped in, and this is the advice that I can really, like, listen to and take.
Yes, and that is the point of evidential mediumship, is so that you can trust the message. And even in my angel readings and my mediumship readings, I'm like, please tell me things I could not have known that resonate as truth to them. And when you start to read for people who are more high profile, whose whole life is, like, on the internet, I say, first of all, no reader has time to, like, research people before readings. I'll just say that. But secondly, I say, please, with this person who's in the public eye, show me things I could not have known that are not online, that are private, that show that I could not have known. And I ask for those specifics for those readings, because it makes a really big difference. And it reminds me of this one reading I did. I'm not sure if I told this story on the pod, but there was a mother I was reading for, and her angels were showing me that her son was special needs and that he needed to go at his own pace, and that's okay, and to trust his path, and all these different messages. She's like, that's pretty cool, but it's not as impressive because you follow me on Instagram. And this was just a random woman. And I was like, oh, I'm really glad that you said that, because I don't follow you on Instagram, and there's about 100 fake accounts pretending to be me. And she looked, and it wasn't the real me. And I was like, lady, you think I'm following my clients and looking at their life? You think I have time for that? But also, I'm really glad you spoke up, because you would have, like, thought that. And so that just shows these fake accounts can be so damaging, because people really think I follow them and know about what's going on in their life and then read for them.
It's so funny now too, because, like, now that I know you and I'm aware of these fake accounts, I mean, the minute I like another spiritual account, a fake one with their name will follow me. And it was like the first time I was like, oh my God, they're following me back. And then it's like, no, that's your first red flag. They're not going to follow you back. They're a high profile account. It is like so important to be really cognizant in this space online and know that like someone who is legitimately doing this, you'll be able to tell that their account is legitimate. They're not going to reach out to you. They're not going to follow you, most likely, unless you have an actual connection with them. They are not going to have weird photos. Like, you can tell who the real accounts are and do your research, because those people are literally out there to dupe you. And it's really a shame because it can overshadow the beautiful message that these people like you have to offer and the healing and magic that they have to offer.
Thank you. And they usually make all their posts within like 48 hours. So that's how you can tell too. And most of the legit accounts have like at least over 100 posts, and most of the not legit accounts have like 10 to 30 or something like that. And they also have very little engagement. They make multiple posts a day. It's pretty obvious. And then they screenshot, or they take the profile picture and then they edit a red ring around it as if there's a story. They're just so crafty. But I hope people are waking up to that now, because it's been going on for so long.
I think so, and it's like it only takes a couple times before you start to get wise to it and realize like what's real and what isn't. And it's also in the spiritual space, I think that's where it's happening the most. I think because people are vulnerable.
Yeah. And in the crypto space, they're like, hey, I'll make your $20 into 200. Like, send it to me.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So, the internet can be a beautiful tool. And also we have to be smart and savvy with it and protect ourselves.
It's a great opportunity to practice spiritual discernment, and just know that any legit reader is not going to ask to give you a reading. They're either on a wait list, or if they're in the beginning of their development, you'll hear about them from word of mouth or resonate with something they posted or find them in an organic way. But they're not predatory if they're legit, trying to say, I have a message for you, I want to speak to you, I want to connect with you. All of that is a scam.
Yeah. And something that I love so much about you that we've talked about in the past too is like reaching out to someone and saying, I have a message for you, is an absolute violation of somebody's space and energy. The only time we should be giving messages is when we have been invited in. And if somebody is offering up information about your life that they have chosen to take and tap into, like, that is a violation. They need to be invited in.
Absolutely. And if they're not in alignment with that, they're most definitely not working with angels. And that's who I work with, which is all about free will. And if you're not asking for the message, I'm not going to give you the message. And once you get to a place where you can control your senses and your empathy and your sensitivity, you're not just getting messages all the time either. I'm just living like a normal person when I'm outside of sacred container, unless it's like a very intense situation and I pick up on something. Like, I immediately don't like someone's energy or something. I can't help if that happens.
Well, that just happens, like we are human beings, we feel energy. But yeah, I respect and love so much that you wait to be invited in, and you're not just going around tapping into people's deepest, most personal energy. Like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I think that is like ethically really important.
So important. And it shows that you're in ego, not in service, if you're doing that. Because I'm here to serve, not to be right. And when we just go up to people with messages, maybe you think that's of service, but in reality, it seems like it's coming more from, I want to be right, or I want to get you your money, or I want you to be impressed by what I'm saying. And when you're of service, you create little branches for connection, and then you let people find them and resonate with them in their own time.
I love that. That's a beautiful way of framing it.
Yes, thank you. So there is one more thing that I want to talk about. I promise this isn't going to turn into a part 5 because I'm almost through everything, but I wanted to talk about Val Williams and one of her core teachings, which I've quoted multiple times on the podcast. She is the one who coined feel the fear and do it anyway. And that really is a cornerstone of mediumship development. It is scary to trust ourselves. It is scary to trust a source of information that is a whisper at first, and to put ourselves in a vulnerable situation to give evidence that could be a no. And that is a part of evidential mediumship, is that you might get a no, but that's okay. And demonstrating, at least for me, is like the scariest thing in the world. And you have to feel the fear and do it anyway, like she says. And that's a good motto for everything in life, because fear is here to protect us and keep us safe. But part of that traps us in an uncomfortable comfort zone, and we can never grow and expand and find the edges of what's possible in this life in terms of love and magic and joy and connection if we can't feel the fear and do it anyway.
It's so true about everything. I think we gain so much when we push ourselves into a space we are afraid of and do it anyway. And no matter what happens with that particular experience, you gain a trust in yourself that you can do hard things, and that when something scares you next time, you have this arsenal of experience being like, well, last time I was scared and I did it and I was okay. Maybe I fell on my face, but I picked myself back up. And doing that, no matter what the scary thing is so beneficial. And we can only grow and expand when we push ourselves.
So true. And when you look at the people at the top of their game, you think they never felt fear. Like Simone Biles is quoted saying like that she went to therapy right before her gold medal performance. So everybody at the top feels the fear, but the key ingredient is doing it anyway.
She's such a beautiful example of that, especially with her journey with the last Olympics, and how instead of giving into the pressure of all the negative things people were saying or feeling like I have to do this, she did what was right for her in that moment. And I can't imagine how scary it must have been this time around to step back into this space, but she did it anyway. And got several more gold medals, I'm pretty sure.
I know. The U.S. women's gymnastics team, like, wow, just chef's kiss. Makes me proud to be an American. It's like one of the things in the column that I'm proud of.
And I mean, just from the beginning to do a backflip is terrifying. Like the thought of doing that for me is absolutely a hard no. But, to do that, you have to push through the fear, and you do it in the foam pit and all that stuff. But like, it is really scary to go for these things. Even I think sometimes the things that are in our hearts the most, of like, I really want to do this, or this feels right. I think sometimes that can be the scariest thing, because the stakes are really high for us, because it matters to us. It's important. And the fear of like, well, what if I go for it and I fail? Will that be harder than just never trying? Like, there's so much that can hold us back from going for the things that we love most. And we gain nothing from sitting on the sidelines and not going for it. Even if you don't achieve what you think you will, you gain so much from just going for it.
And you create momentum for your angels to work with. Maybe what your initial thing you're setting out for isn't your destination, but it at least initiates movement that can direct you and course correct you. One of the biggest things I'm seeing lately is people at a place in their life where they feel burnt out in their current career but don't know what to do next. And their angels and guides send them these little glimmers of a step they can take, a project they can do, a book they can read, a topic they can go into. And immediately the mind is like, this won't work because of this, or who will even like this, or how will I make money doing this? And they shut off the tap of inspiration and forward momentum at the source. And then they feel lost and confused and burnt out. But it's because they just said no to the answer. And the answer, especially when it's coming from angels, is not predicting your future. It's not saying 10 years from now you'll be a best-selling author. It's saying this is the step here and now to initiate the process to get to your highest possible timeline and to detangle the cords. And so I see this, it can happen in any area, but I've been seeing it a lot in career where people have gotten to the top of either a corporate ladder or a doctor or a lawyer, these like really prestigious positions, but they're burnt out, they're exhausted, and it's not what their heart chose, it's what their survival instincts chose. And now those same survival instincts are keeping them trapped or stuck in a story of life that isn't really authentic to them, but they don't know where to go next. And so when we say feel the fear and do it anyway, it doesn't mean you have to jump into demonstrating the first time, but can you practice a baby step and then another baby step and then another baby step? Can you feel the fear and then take 3 baby steps until you push yourself? You can be gentle with yourself, but the do it anyway part means action.
Yes, I love something that Lisa said in the episode a couple weeks ago, where she said, if there is fear, you better believe that's where you got to go.
Yes, that's where power is.
Yes, and I think fear can be an indicator, right? It can be a signpost, like how jealousy can be a signpost. It's like a negative emotion. We, look at it as negative, but to me, jealousy is information. It's like, you want this. You see this other person with this thing and you want it. And while that can be crunchy, what a great directional point of saying, okay. And same with like, this scares the hell out of me. So like, maybe I need to take a look at it and take, like you said, a tiny step towards it. Like do some research on it, take a class, have a conversation with someone about it. The amount of things that have come into my life because I've just been like, I'm thinking about this thing or I want to do this thing. And then suddenly someone overhears and they're like, oh, I could help you with that. It's like even those micro steps towards these things have giant ripple effects that in 10 years then we'll realize like, oh, all those little baby steps led me to being the author or whatever it is.
Exactly. Hindsight is 2020. And the message that I got as you were speaking was that when we believe fear, we're subconsciously believing disempowered narratives. So basically, when we believe the fear and feel the fear and don't move forward, we are almost praying to the idea of whatever that core fear is I am not enough. I'll never be worthy. Whatever that core fear is that's branching out and trying to keep you safe so that that's never proven to you and you're just in this little bubble. It's like we are feeding it every time we hold ourselves back, every time we say no, every time we speak over what our heart asks for. We're strengthening that voice that says, you are not good enough. You are not lovable. You will never be successful. And it's so important to prove ourselves wrong, not from a place. And this comes back to that idea of what I talk about of redefining success, because the ego can also be really clear on what success is. And as soon as you get it, the yardstick will move again because the ego's never satisfied. The heart has a different idea of what success looks like. And when you follow that path of success, that is when doors open for you and you are in alignment with your highest timeline.
I really resonate with that. It's so, so true. I think it is really the path forward and choosing not to agree with the fear. Maybe the fear brings it up, but we can choose to say, you're right, I'm not enough. Or you can choose to say, I'm afraid that that's true, but I choose not to believe it. And I choose to make a choice in the direction that doesn't prove that to be right.
And there's an aspect of my consciousness who remembers who I really am and knows that that is not the truth. And a message that came through that I'm going to share in Leo Season Earth Angel Club is truth is power. And I feel that so deeply. And another message I got about truth is that truth is simple. When messages come through, truth is simple. The messages that are ranting and raving and running down the hill are not truth. Truth is simple and truth is power. And when we are in our truth, which is who we really are, which is the part of us that is all, that is spirit, that is love. And when we are in resonance with truth, there is nothing that could take us from our power because we remember the truth. And when you're in that truth, maybe it's easier to feel the fear and do it anyway because you remember.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. Well, I think this wraps up everything I wanted to speak about with my time at AFC. It was just such an amazing time, and it's crazy to see, and I know I spoke about this in part 3 of catching the mediumship bug, where you just can't get enough of it. And since my time at AFC, there was a moment where I was like, I need to take all the courses and I need to go back to AFC and I need to go to the Omega Institute in New York, which is the closest thing we have here to AFC. Some of the spiritualist tutors teach there, I believe. And then I just took a moment. I was like, okay, don't run down the hill, because I remember when I was in groundlings, I got addicted to being a student and just like feeling like I could just go through the levels and work towards something in a format that felt really familiar to me. And I was like, no, this time I'm not going to get addicted to being a student. I'm going to use the beauty and the sanctuary and the intentionality of AFC intentionally. But since then, I've joined a mediumship circle. I have 3 different mediumship mentors. One of them is Mark, who I spoke about. 2 of them are Matt and Dana, who maybe I'll have them on the pod one day. But I've just been developing in my own way and trying to find my own voice in the space, and can't get enough of connection. And I've introduced it professionally, and I'm just so grateful to everybody who trusts me in the space. It's truly my honor to bring through your loved ones in spirit. And it's just amazing, as I've reflected back on this whole journey, how far I've come in the year since AFC, and how devoted and dedicated I've been to it in this year. And it just shows life can change really fast. Somehow I'm a medium now, when last August I wasn't. And maybe I was, but I just didn't know it, and I wasn't developed. And maybe that's you too. So whatever your heart is asking you for, take this as evidence that even a year from now, if you say yes. I felt so much fear going to Arthur Findlay College. I went by myself. I almost talked myself out of it. I was so scared. I had so much resistance, but I did it anyway because I remembered who I really was. And a year from now, whatever your heart is asking for can be yours if you say yes to it now.
That is so inspiring, Taylor. And thank you so much for sharing about your experiences with all of us. Like, it's inspired me and opened my mind to things I didn't really know were possible. And I'm sure it's done the same for so many people listening. So it's really beautiful that you have shared this with us, and also sharing your gifts. Like, I know it is a gift for people to be able to connect, and you are a bridge for them. So thanks.
Oh, thank you, Claire. I love you. And I love talking about these things with you. And it's just so fun to dive deep into it. And I'm really hoping that my journey not only brings more people to the college and helps people know that the college is there, but also inspires you to go for whatever your heart asks for, whether that's mediumship or something else.
Yes, that is so beautiful.
Let's transition to sitting with spirit. Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves. If you're new to the podcast, this is the part where I sit with our angels, our loved ones in spirit, and give the messages for the collective, take what resonates with you. And if the past loved one reading, if some of it resonates but not all of it, know that it might be your past loved one sending little winks to you. They like to work together to give the evidence that the most people will understand. So that being said, I'm going to start with our angel reading portion. And the main message that I get right now is that it is time to be so real with ourselves in our life about what's working and what's not. And I felt like this was a big moment collectively of throat chakra upgrades. And it's like anything that you've been holding back, anything, Claire's laughing. She knows what I'm talking about, but I swear I wasn't thinking about you.